You're listening to the Radius Church podcast, recorded live each Sunday in North Hollywood, California.
To get us started with our conversation today, I want to ask what sounds like a very morbid question, but it's pretty empowering. What regrets do you think you will have on your deathbed? Wah, wah. I know, that sounds like a morbid thought, but it's empowering to think about it. You can now, ahead of time, be predicting what are some regrets that you may have if nothing changes. What are some regrets that you might have in the last moments of your life? What do you think those are going to be? I didn't take this risk. I didn't have this experience. I didn't draw that boundary. I didn't say no fast enough. I didn't get started soon enough. What do you think those regrets are going to be? There's a hospice nurse from Australia. Her name's Bronnie Ware. And for several years, her job was to care for people in the last 12 weeks of their lives. That was her job, to provide encouragement and comfort measures for people who are suffering and nearing those last moments of their lives. And so firsthand, she got to experience what some of those regrets were. People from all walks of life, a diversity of backgrounds. She noticed a pattern of regret, that no matter where they came from and what their life experience was, there were just similar regrets that people voiced having in the last moments of their lives. And she wrote about it on her blog, and then the blog goes viral, and then she gets a book deal, and then she has a TED Talk. Maybe some of you have even seen it. And then sociologists jump in and start doing more statistical analysis to back up her experience, that what she experienced in that hospice care unit in Australia tends to be true in all cultures across the board. What's fascinating about it is that 4 of the top 5 regrets that people say they have in the last moments of their lives have to do with relationships. It might not seem that profound, but no matter how successful someone is financially or in their career, no matter what they've accomplished over the course of their lives, no matter how they're meeting their end, whether it's a sudden demise or a deterioration, or it's a long illness that's taking them out, when they face that end, the top 4 of the top 5 regrets people voice having have to do with the relationships that they have or didn't have over the course of their lives. Just a few of them in the top 5 is people would say something like, I wished I hadn't lived the life that others expected of me. In other words, I wish some of my relationships didn't tell me who to be. I didn't try to measure up or keep up or live up to what people who really didn't want my best told me I needed to be. Another one that people voice is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wished I hadn't worked so hard because of what it took away from my relationships with people. Another one people voice is, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings, be the real me in relationship with people. I feel like I'm dying and not fully known is another way that people express that regret. Another regret that people say on their deathbed is, I wished I had stayed more in touch with the people that I care about the most. 4 of the top 5 regrets. And I don't remember what the 5th regret is offhand. It probably has something to do with owning cats or something like that, but I don't like cats, whatever. I wonder if there's a way now that we can make decisions that would mitigate the potential of these kinds of regrets at the end of our lives. Could we make decisions now, create priorities now, that would reduce relational regret when we meet our end? The thing about regret is that regret, we've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks, regret lives in that territory between wanting and willing. When we're not able to promote or graduate our wants into some things we are willing to do, then those wants just generate disappointment and regret. I want better relationships, or I want financial freedom, or I want more spiritual strength. Unless we can convert those into, I will create habits, or I will put myself in a context, or I will take some risks, then those wants just generate regret and disappointment over the course of our lives. We know this. And that's the point of this series, is to try and reduce some of those regrets by converting our best, our healthiest wants into wills. Because the person this year who is willing to do something about key categories of their lives will outpace all of us who are simply just wanting to make progress in our lives, or wanting to get healing, or wanting to find freedom in our lives. So when it comes to our relationships, the question we want to ask is, what are you willing to do to place yourself in the context of healthy, great, enriching relationships? Now, I'm going to ask you to do something right now that some of you, statistically probably half of you, are not going to want to do, but we don't do it very often, so please humor me. I'm going to ask you to turn to somebody you don't know and say something. okay? Introverts in the room, good news. You only need to say one word. Extroverts in the room, you only need to say one word. And to give you some time to process, let me prepare you for what I want you to say, the response I want you to give, again, to somebody hopefully that you didn't know before you got here today. I want you to name somebody, just a name, that has made a big impact on your life, that you would say, this, because of this person, I am to some degree who I am today, or I am where I am today because of this person. Now, preferably, this would not be your parents or your biological family. They definitely had an impact on who you are. But I'm talking about somebody who you just almost would say providentially showed up at a key moment in your life and gave you another chapter when you thought you were a closed book. Or somebody who showed up at a key moment in your life and they answered a big burning question that's just been nagging your soul or your mind. Somebody who showed up at a key point in your life and they gave you the example of the way to live life, or an example of integrity that helped you kind of measure up or level up to what you wanted to become as a man or a woman. Maybe it was a boss that you served with, and then all of a sudden you found out this was a person of faith, and they catapulted bigger questions, and maybe you discovered faith for the first time. I want you to name somebody, and maybe you wouldn't say God put them in your life. Maybe some of you would say, yeah, God placed this person in my life. It almost came out of nowhere. They gave me a breakthrough. They gave me progress. They helped me discover something. They gave me a better idea, and I am who I am today to some degree because of this person. Okay, I've given you enough time to process. Now I want you to find a total stranger, and I want you to say this name. Go. One word. These people have long names. Like Meyer Shallow Hashbaz was a huge influence on my life. All right. So I had some time to think about it because I knew what I was going to talk about this weekend. So I have lots of names. Some of them I've shared before. I've shared the impact that a couple, Rick and Susie Saunders, had on my life. This was a couple who volunteered in our youth group, like Loom, when I was growing up. And I entered into high school just wandering, like so many of us in many seasons of our life. I don't know what to live for. I had big questions about life. I had so many insecurities. And Rick was a small business owner, and he and his wife, they just volunteered with our youth group. All of the leaders, by the way, up at camp with Loom, they are all volunteers. These are adults who do not have to be there and chose to hang out with our kids, our teenagers. Superstars. If anybody deserves like a mansion in heaven, it's these people right there. But Rick and Susie Saunders were two people like that, and they invested in me, and they answered my questions. They let me be real at a time when I didn't know if I was comfortable being real with my parents or with some of my teachers at school or even with some of my friends because of how they would think of me or look down on me, or if I was going to make it weird. Rick and Susie Saunders were there, and they helped me discover faith in Jesus for the first time and changed absolutely everything in my life. But not only that, they took this like knucklehead 15-year-old and they let me serve within the youth group. So it wasn't just me sitting here as a consumer like so many people are used to. I saw myself now as a contributor, that I had gifts that other people wanted and needed. I had a story to tell that might encourage somebody else. That was Rick and Susie Saunders for me. Another person that I have to mention in the course of my life is a guy named Brian Loritz. And I met Brian. I got the privilege of serving under this exceptional leader and preacher and pastor near the end of my college career and then early in my adulthood. I served in a local church with him, and he took this little college kid aside, and he started dreaming with me and a few others about how to create an environment for people that traditional church wouldn't reach and traditional church wouldn't serve. And I remember when I moved from being a career musician after 12 years to becoming a pastor, Brian reached out to me and he said, listen, I know you haven't gone to seminary, which I have not, just FYI. You might never want to come back after you find that out. But he's like, listen, for what it's worth, I want to pour into you my experience as a leader, as a preacher. I want to coach you in your marriage, like having a marriage within ministry is a unique, weird thing. And Brian Loritz was a key component in the person, the leader, the preacher I am today. He also helped me pick out my engagement ring for my wife, and he officiated our wedding, but that's just a cool sidebar. Another guy that I got to mention is a guy named Carl Mascarella. And Carl was a guy that my wife and I met when we were involved in this Tuesday night group that was studying the Bible together. And about a year and a half or so into our marriage, about a year into our marriage, I was finally able to, or wanting to, or needing to face my addictions. And I sort of hit a rock bottom, and Katie was so gracious to me and saying, hey, let's work through this together. But Carl became my counselor and my sponsor early on, and the freedom that I've experienced, the sobriety I've experienced since then was to some degree because Carl happened to be in my life. And I would even go so far as to say, God placed these people in my life. Now, of course, I had a part to play in this. God doesn't force his way into your life. I had to say yes, or I had to ask the question. I had to invite the conversation. And there's been so many times in my life where I'm just like, hey, I got this. I can figure this out on my own. That's easy for guys to do, especially a guy like me. But these were people who were willing, listen, to make my life their business. And that changed everything for me. And if you talk to people who have some self-awareness, they talk about their own story, somewhere as they're telling their story, they're going to mention several people who were providential people in their lives and helped create the person that they now are. You know, that they will say, like, listen, I am the man or the woman I am today because of this person or because of this other person or because of this leader or because of this teacher. And, you know, no one would ever say, hey, I am who I am today all on my own. Like, I never followed anybody's example. I never asked a question. I just Googled it. I figured out everything. I am who I am today completely on my own. No, everybody's like, no, I was serving with the supervisor and her integrity just awakened me to something. I asked some big questions. I found out she's like a Christian. I was like, do people even do that anymore? And then she starts talking to me about that. Or I had this neighbor, and he decided to sacrifice for me at a time of need, and then that awakened some of my compassion and my instincts for hospitality for people. I saw the way that this person handled their finances or treated their kids or served their spouse, and it just changed the way that I was thinking about life. I saw the emotional stability that someone had when they hit a tragedy, and it helped me explore this whole thing of faith in the spiritual life that might serve me when I need it most. This person played a key part of me becoming who I am today. Now, of course, that principle cuts both ways. I'm not going to do this, but I could ask you to turn to your new best friend that you just met today, and you could easily name people who have totally sabotaged your life for some seasons, right? Right? People who have undermined your faith, or, and in my case, and probably yours, fueled some of your worst decisions, or some helped encourage, gave you a context for some of your worst habits that you've formed, maybe even addictions. That's in the context of relationship. I mean, isn't it true that your worst moments, your biggest regrets happen in the context of some sort of immaturity or unhealthy relationship? And usually what happens is we're lured into these relationships because somebody is sparkling in one category of life, and we just assume they have something to offer in every other category. But what we often find, and you know this is the case, as you get to know people, you find out that this is somebody who's really invested maybe in their career, their future, or their notoriety, but is not really invested in their own character. And they will accidentally, often it's not with ill intent, lead you into a context or an environment in which, and you can't really put your finger on it, you can't really measure it, but you would say, gosh, the more I'm with this person, the smaller I feel, or the more afraid I feel. I just really feel like life is deteriorating because I'm with them. And they've got so much of what I want in one category, but it seems like it's ripping me apart in every other category. Now, we all want those kinds of relationships that are going to build us up, help us grow up, help us shape up. Most of us would not argue with the desire to want those people in our lives, those key people. We call them providential relationships. Who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want to have awesome relationships, awesome friends in their lives? Of course we do. Of course we want that. But the question 2020 is asking of you is, will you? Will you do what you can? Can't do it all. But will you place yourself in a context? Will you put yourself out there? Will you ask the question? Will you invite to coffee? Will you create the opportunity for these kinds of people to be involved in your life? And maybe when the moment is right, and I would say when God actually intersects in your life, they will be that person who fuels your faith, gives you peace of mind, gives you wisdom when you need it most. Now, if you strain to remember it, you might go back to some times in your lives when people have tried to do this and you didn't accept it. Maybe it was a year ago, maybe it was 2 years ago, maybe when you were a teenager, maybe even before that. And somebody started to nudge you a little bit or challenge you or started to ask you questions and wanted to be transparent with you, but it was uncomfortable or it felt silly because nobody else around you was doing this or thinking about life like this. And so you ghosted them. Maybe you felt kind of that little nudge underneath the surface you don't want to admit. You're like, they do have something that I want, but it just seems too difficult, honestly. Well, what if that was God's way of trying to draw you into a context that would give you something that you need? But the choice was yours, and you chose to walk away. That's okay. The good news is the choice is still yours. You have a choice today. Maybe this is a year where you won't just want those kinds of people in your life or wish you had those people in your life, but you will choose to position yourself in a context where great things can happen in relationships, and you will refuse to go another year just living the status quo. Now, I think this is a sermon, so I should probably quote the Bible at some point. And actually, everything I'm talking about is covered in Scripture cover to cover. This is on display in the earliest accounts of human relationships we see. And throughout all of the historical works and poetry and prophetic literature and the correspondence, the biographies of Jesus, you see this principle at play. It's so obvious that you would call this common knowledge or common wisdom, that even if you're not sure what you think about the Bible or Jesus or faith, you would probably agree with what we're talking about today. So I'm going to sound like I'm repeating something that you totally know, and I'm going to be saying the same thing over and over again, but I don't want us to make the mistake that just because we're familiar with the idea that we're actually applying it. So that's why I'm going to keep repeating myself today, because I love you. One of the ways this pops up in Scripture is in Proverbs, which I love Proverbs. Thousands of years before we had Twitter, they gave us such tweetable content. It's like somebody had the forethought to do this. Here's one example. You see it on the screen behind me. Proverbs 13:20. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Again, not profound. The people that you choose to surround yourself with will impact who you become. Full stop. The people you choose to surround yourself with will impact who you become. Most of the time when we need advice, we go to the people we're most comfortable with. We go to our friends. And maybe some of your friends have good advice, but for the most part, your friends know you. They're going to say things that you probably already knew or you probably already would agree with, and that's why you go to them, because it's just easy. And again, some of you might have really, really smart friends, but in my experiences, I've talked to some of you, and I've heard some of the advice that some of your friends have given you. I'll be honest with you, some of you have dumb friends. And I won't point out who, but afterwards, at the Next Steps tent, if you want to just ask me, Joseph, do you think I have one of those dumb friends? Well, I'll be honest with you. Yeah, you have a dumb friend. You don't have to agree with me. That's fine. But oftentimes, they don't necessarily have what it takes, or they don't have the compulsion or the desire to help you grow. They just want to make you comfortable. The truth is, outside of your friends, most of us are surrounded by people who are not thinking about building into your future. It just never even crosses their mind. And again, not ill intent. It's just they're not thinking about that. The good news is, though, at least we're swimming in a culture that really wants to inspire heroic character and faith in you. That's a joke. No. You are swimming in a culture that tells you to do whatever you feel like doing. 9 out of 10 times, that is horrible advice. So where do you go for wisdom that, yes, acknowledges how you feel, but helps you understand what to do with how you feel? Walk with the wise, listen to the wise, seek out the wise, and guess what? Over some time, give it some time, you know how people are going to start to describe you? Wise. Walk with the wise and become what other people need. You will become wise. Another place where the contrasting idea is brought up and explored quite a bit, actually, is in Paul's letter to the Christians in the city of Corinth. And he was an early Jesus leader, but he actually quotes a common play, or well-known familiar play for them, when he says in 1 Corinthians 15, "Do not be misled," which is a really nice way of saying, if you disagree with me, you're wrong. Don't be misled. And then here's where he quotes a very familiar story for them. "Bad company corrupts good character." He's quoting Menander's comedy. It's a Greek comedy. It'd be like me quoting The Big Lebowski to make the point. He's like, listen, all of us would agree that hanging out with bad company, it corrupts otherwise really, really good character. Again, this is common sense. But the reason Paul's talking about, if you read the rest of the context of that, he wants you to know that it's not just going to affect your social environment, but this actually has an eternal spiritual impact on your life. You know that the radius of relationships that you are in affects you. You know it shapes you. So is it possible that the God who loves you more than you could love yourself and wants to grow your character and give you that strength of faith that is going to survive the tragedies of life, he wants to give you so much more through some of these key relationships than often you're seeking. He wants you to have great relationships. Now, what Paul is not saying, and what I'm not saying, just in case you're afraid of this, Paul's not saying cut people out of your life. He's not saying, I'm not saying sterilize your environment. Keep those friendships. In fact, there's a really crucial reason you need to keep those friendships, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. But what Paul is acknowledging is not every relationship is going to be productive for you. And you have to pay attention to that because you, again, have a choice. So, how do we make the most of this principle, this idea this year? How do you mitigate some of those regrets that some people live their entire lives never addressing? And form great relationships that help catapult your faith, catapult your life, produce growth for your future. Don't just want to know people who will help you grow. How will you get to know people who will help you grow? My wife and I, we homeschooled our daughters for several years. We also made our own soaps and never shaved anything or whatever. I'm kidding. I'm making all that up. We did homeschool them. And we got to be involved in this larger sort of cohort of homeschooling families, and they would share classes together. We got to know some of those families and some of those kids. It was really great. And I remember this one moment where I'm talking to another dad who was involved in this homeschooling thing. And I'll never forget what he said that he loved about this season of our lives. He said, what's really great about this is I cannot choose my daughter's friends for her, but I'm still at a stage where I can determine the pool from which she draws those friends. And that's still true to some degree of the relationship we still have, Kate and I still have with our teenage daughter, and certainly our youngest daughter, that we're still at a stage where we can choose the pool from which they draw those friends. And then I hope that as they get older, because of their experiences, when they have a chance to not only choose their friends, but choose the pool, the tribe from which they draw those friends, that they are going to choose people who build them up, not tear them down. Build them up and strengthen them, not rip them apart or hold them back. I think that we can leverage this principle now as grown-ups. I really think that we can leverage this principle in how we grow together. This is not the only way that this is going to happen. It's not the only place that you can find some of these incredible relationships, but we would be foolish to ignore the opportunity there is to form great relationships here, a pool from which some of these powerful moments could happen. That's why you hear us talking more about starting point and groups and Unravel and Carbon than anything else, because here we are in these rows. We're not practicing relationship right now. When you get out of these rows or you start to serve or you start to develop relationships, it might not be a perfect fit. That might not be, at first, the people that God's going to use to be a part of your story. But you are increasing the likelihood, because of your context, that you're going to be around some of those amazing people who will be there at just the right time. You're increasing your odds of being in context with somebody that, you're going to say, like, I was struggling, or I was wondering this thing, and then, wow, I just met her, or I met him, and we had this conversation in a small group or starting point, or when we were setting up for Sunday morning, and it just seemed to answer the question I was asking, or it gave me the encouragement I needed to endure the season that I was in. I was just in the right pool. I was in the right context at the right time. I see so many examples of this in our small group. Our small group has prompted people to quit their jobs when it was toxic and horrible for them and holding back their future. Yeah, your group could get you to quit your job. I don't know if you want that. We have we've encouraged people when they've been facing incredible challenges in their relational life and their financial life, or when they're trying to create some dream entrepreneurial effort for the future, definitely to fuel our own faith and healthy habits that deepen our intimacy with the Father, deepen our intimacy with Jesus. We're there at just the right time often when people are facing tragedy. I hear so many examples of this. There's an email actually from one of our other small groups, Devon. Some of you know Devon, and he leads a small group. And he emailed me several months ago talking about how God used the group to be there at just the right time for somebody. So I'm going to take an excerpt from that email. I didn't even ask his permission. I'm just going to read this. This is why you should never email me. Okay. Devon writes, when groups kicked off this round, I had an almost entirely new group, new people. So guiding this small group seemed like an uphill run on sand. If you're in Devon's group, this is how he describes you when you first met him. And then something happened. This is so cool. A member of the group, this is like in the first couple weeks of their group, a member of the group experienced the heaviest traumatic week. He lost his sister to a sudden heart attack, found out that his mother was diagnosed with a terminal disease all within 1 week. And this amazing group came together. Devon does not claim this idea. He says, everybody came together and led the charge doing this. I just got to be a part of the movement. They raised money for him because he needed some money. They signed cards, and then they would reach out to him that following week. This individual expressed countless times following this how much the group prayed for him, reached out to him, and encouraged his faith, and his mind was blown. That's why in Rad City, our children's environments, and in Illum, our youth environments, it's so crucial for the people who serve in there are in relationship with those students, not just entertaining them or keeping them busy and giving them activities while we're in here, kidless. It's so important that they establish relationships because you never know if they might be at the perfect place at the perfect time to be that tipping point of faith or character for our kids. That's why, and you know I'm very direct about this, that's why if you are a parent, which I know is not everybody in this room, but if you are a parent, you don't just bring your kids to church on Sunday when you feel like it. No, or when they feel like it. That's even worse. Kids never feel, at least at first, like going to church. No, you drag them out of bed, and you throw enough clothes to make them publicly presentable, and you get them here. And I'm not saying every week's going to be like right on target, and like, whoa, it was exactly what my child needed, or exactly what I needed. Of course, that's not going to be the case always, but here's what's going to happen. I guarantee it. There's going to be a point in your future where you will have given anything to have an adult in your child's life when they're going through a crisis and they are afraid to bring it up to you. And you want at least one of those adults to be somebody who's going to encourage character and faith in the life of that child. That's why we're committed to it. That's why we talk about groups. May not be a perfect fit, may not get you the charge that you need every single week that you're in it, but it's an act of faith. God, I trust that you use people to shape people. And I know there's going to be a point in my future where I'm going to need somebody, so I cannot be surrounded by nobody. I'll choose this. That's why if you're exploring faith, or you're just getting started in a relationship with Jesus, we invite you into that conversational environment, that starting point. 8 weeks of a guided conversation where you can be yourself and be around other people who are asking big, smart questions like you are. And maybe it'll catalyze faith. Maybe it'll just give you some bigger questions to ask. But most people walk away from that forging at least 1 or 2 brand new friendships or relationships in a city where, let's be honest, it is so difficult to find people that we want to even hang out with, let alone who build us up. I want to turn this inside out as I close up today. Because sometimes when we talk about this principle, it is easy to leave the whole conversation seeking out relationships that will simply benefit you. I want that for you. God wants that for you. But as I close, there's one last thing that I have to bring up. You have a radius. You are this person for someone else. You, this week, what I highly encourage you to do if you're a praying person is to take a few people in your life that you love, you care about, but if you're honest, they're spiritually disconnected from God right now. They might feel a little lost, or they're falling apart. You start praying for them. Pray for them every single day by name. God, I want your best for them. I know you want the best for them. Just prompt me to know how to serve them. Prompt me to know how to encourage them, to speak with them. I'll warn you, though, you start praying for them, and you won't just still like that person and love that person, but their spiritual condition is going to start breaking your heart. Might even prompt you to have one of those awkward conversations, Because that's how the best stuff happens, is somebody risks enough to say, like, listen, I know this isn't much of my business, or, I know that you weren't really asking me, or, listen, I know that you said that you look up to me, so I just wanted to share something, or, listen, I don't know if this is helpful, but maybe you want to just come for next week and be around a bunch of people, diversity people, and just talk about life together. I'll save you a seat. You can sit next to me. Maybe this is the week where God is going to prompt you to be that person for somebody else. Having that awkward conversation, inviting somebody into your life, inviting somebody into your experience and your faith. Maybe this is the week to do that. Maybe you take that risk. And I'm not saying that we can guarantee this, but that's how you create those moments that those people are going to talk about sometime in the future. When someone asks them their story and how did you become the man or the woman you are today, they're going to look back and say, I'm so thankful that my neighbor didn't give up. My roommate didn't give up. My boyfriend didn't give up. This teacher didn't give up on me. And even though I ghosted them for a while, they just kept asking and kept investing in my life. They made my life their business, and they loved me. And I'm so thankful that they challenged me and invited me, because God used him, God used her, God used them to tell his story through my life. And I'm changed because of it. Why don't you stand with us as we pray? I'm so thankful, God, that you've reserved some of our relationship with you for the relationship we need to have with each other. It's almost like you've tucked away just a little bit of our experience of you in the lives of other people. It means that I can't fully experience your love, fully experience your wisdom, fully experience intimacy with you if I'm not experiencing deep relationship with people. So, this week, may we move beyond simply wanting powerful relationships in our lives. May we be willing to take a step of faith, put ourselves in a context, into a circle that may not feel like a perfect fit at first, may not answer all the questions right away, but we're trusting that we're now within a community, an environment, a pool from which some of those moments are going to emerge. God, I want to be around more of these people who will feed my life. And God, I also pray that you would prompt us, give us a couple of names of people that we love, we care about. And maybe this is the week where we encourage them, challenge them, invite them. Maybe we are that providential moment, relationship for someone that you love and you've placed in our context, our radius, our circles. Jesus, we love you. Thank you for loving us first, loving us best. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Thank you for listening. For more information, follow us on social media at Radius Church LA and visit us on the web at radius.la.